let's move on now. Thank you, Anne, to Laura, and I'll introduce Laura. Laura, as I said, is the program leader or course leader of the Bachelor of Education, Health and Phys Ed at Monash. She's published in a whole range of different journals. She's on the editorial board of a range of journals. She's also where is it here? She's on the International Advisory Board for the European Phys Ed Review and the College of Reviewers of Sport, Education and Society. She's also on the HPE Tertiary Engagement and Research Subcommittee, and her research focuses on HPE, sport, physical activity contexts, and the ways in which policy, professional learning, which is what we're doing today, and practice can contribute in creative ways to inclusion and educative experiences for young people. So over to you, Laura.
Thanks, Amanda. What a welcome. There is a high bar there. I've just popped a few URLs in the chat. Some you will definitely need, some are kind of just back up in case technology is not my friend today. So firstly, thank you, Amanda, for the invite. I have been tasked with sharing today a few ideas around where creativity is. So I guess responding to that final question that Anne shared, where is creativity and how can we leverage opportunities to foster creativity? So I'll say a little bit more about the intention in a moment, but my name is on the screen, so I don't think I need to repeat it. But yeah, my focus is on exploring creative possibilities in health and physical education. But before we get stuck into that, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land that I live and work on, which is the Bunurong and the Bunurong people. And I'd like to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and acknowledge that land was never ceded. So just to be super explicit about the intention for this session in particular is to support you in using the creative ecologies model that Anne just shared as a tool to support your curriculum planning and teaching in HPE in particular. And hopefully also by the end, you'll feel more comfortable in identifying and sourcing resources that will support you in moving from this idea of creative possibilities towards creative realities. That sounds a little bit like a self-help book, doesn't it? So, big game. I popped that there because do you know when you're teaching invasion games and the kids just want to get to the big game? They don't care about these carefully planned and curated activities and small-sided games. They just want to get to the big game. So with that in mind, you know, when I attend any kind of PD, you want the big creative ideas that you can put into practice tomorrow in the gym or the classroom. So I felt like I needed to be really explicit here and manage your expectations. This session is more about, I guess, broad brush, setting the scene, setting the context, with the sessions to follow from Rosie and Jackie and John to probably give you the more nuts and bolts that you will be able to put into practice tomorrow in your gym or classroom. I say can because that's kind of the operative word here. There's no really one way to be creative or to demonstrate your creativity. And we'll explore some of those ideas as we move forward. So that's the plan of attack. We're talking about creative ecologies and thus this kind of raises thoughts around the importance of context. So I thought it might be useful to share, I guess, a little bit about my context or my creative ecology and I guess my journey into grappling with these ideas and trying to put them into practice. So in 2016, it was 2016, and Anne Harris, she hosted a workshop, a symposium here at Monash, where she was bringing together all her key ideas from the research project she just outlined. And it was a bit of an aha moment for me. She was talking about ideas and resources and spaces that I could see really clearly in health and PE. And then a year later, we were expected to put the new curriculum into practice. So it was a real period of transition and change, and the curriculum was asking us to think of new and different and more creative ways of teaching health and PE than arguably we had been in the past. So she got me at a vulnerable moment. But linking to the creative ecologies that Anne was referring to, in terms of partnerships, I guess Anne was a really key partner for me. Later, I began to work with Rosie and Jackie and John, and they all helped me to see creativity in different ways and think about how it might apply in my day-to-day work, but also the day-to-day work of teachers. I guess the most important partnership in all of this has been my partnerships with teachers and schools. It's all good and well thinking about these things, but unless we can have a go at putting them into practice, then they're nigh on useless. So the policies element of the creative ecology model I've already mentioned, but it really was the new VC-HPE at the time, and especially the 5 propositions. I felt like the 5 propositions were, I guess, a call for creativity. They were the first example I knew of in a HPE curriculum where teachers were asked to teach in particular ways and use particular pedagogies, so critical inquiry, health literacy, educative purpose. In terms of the practices element of the creative ecology, as I said before, for me, all these wonderful ideas aren't particularly useful unless they can work on the ground. So that was, I guess, the exciting part for me, bringing together the partnerships and the policies into practice. That's kind of where the magic happened, and I'll share a little bit later about what that looked like. But in working with teachers over the past 3 or 4 years on this idea of creativity and curriculum change, it's been a constant process of negotiation and experimentation, failure, success, and finding what works best for teachers, students, schools, and communities.
Laura, sorry to jump in. It seems like we've lost your slides. Are you able to screen share again?
Yeah,
We're
sure.
just not watching them, sorry.
That's all right. What can you see?
Just your face. So just you'll need to screen share again, that's all.
How long's that been gone?
About a minute or 2. There we go.
Oh,
perfect.
there we go.
Thank you.
Can you see it now?
Yes, we can indeed. Thanks, Laura.
I might just, okay. You just holler if that doesn't work.
No, it's looking great.
Oh, good? Okay. We might, right. We might shimmy on, but essentially that's kind of my creative ecology. For me, I could see how it's like, as Amanda said in the chat earlier, once you are comfortable around a particular model or a way of seeing things, be it a socio-ecological approach to understanding health, or a sport education model, or creative ecology model, once you have those lenses and those glasses on, you can't really unsee things. So I guess I'm always understanding my capacity to do things differently and more creatively through this lens of creative ecology. So I guess setting the scene and setting the context, again, I want to be really explicit about the assumptions, or some of the assumptions that I bring to this conversation. So one is there's no one way to be creative. There's not necessarily a best practice, gold standard, one way to do this. There's multiple ways that we can think creatively, teach creatively, be creative. As far as I'm concerned, all teachers are creative. I don't think you can do this job without being creative and thinking of new and different ways to do things. 2020 of all years, whether we liked it or not, we had to demonstrate our creativity. And I know I'm probably a bit blinkered here, but I think teaching health and PE remotely is probably one of the most challenging things I've had to do. Some teachers are immersed in schools or communities that are, I guess, more supportive and foster creativity more than others. So I guess we're not really on an equal playing field. And there are some very particular resources that we've found that can support creativity and that can help us as teachers better navigate and leverage creative possibilities. And I'll talk to that a little bit more shortly. And then finally, teaching creatively does not necessarily equate to teaching for creativity, and vice versa. And today the focus really is on us, as opposed to, at least for me, fostering creativity amongst our students. So I've talked enough. I'm going to hand it over to you. And I've got two questions that I'd like you to respond to. So the first one is, what does creativity mean to you? You can take that really broadly, or you can respond in relation to health and PE. To respond to that, I'd like to do it via Slido. So you can either use the URL that's in the chat, or you can go to slido.com and put in create in capitals, where you see the hashtag on the left-hand side. And then the second question is, why is creativity important in HPE? And for that, I'd like to respond via the Google Doc, again in the chat. So thank you for that. In terms of what does creativity mean to you, there's some amazing ideas and thoughts, and I'll share the word cloud with you later. But we've got things like individuality, having fewer guidelines, being me, having the opportunity to invent, create, and explore different ideas. Freedom, thinking outside the box, lots of comments around opportunities, atypical and different, ability to adapt the situation to engage the learners, and a constellation of knowledge, people and places to make and create and feel. How fabulous. I think our job here is done. We can probably go home after that one. In terms of why is creativity important in HP, again, thank you for sharing your thoughts here. Engagement, avoid monotony. It's important in life. You know, as Anne suggested, it's kind of everywhere, and we have, hopefully by the end of the session and the end of today, we feel more comfortable in finding those places, those places for creativity. When I put this Google Doc together, the intention is it will kind of live forever. So hopefully this will be a bit of a collaborative note-taking exercise that you can return to when you're ready. Okay, thank you so much for participating in that. I'll circle back to that towards the end. But for now, don't worry, you've got more to do. So what I want to do now is, and if you have any questions, please just shout out, and I'm sure someone will tell me there's one waiting. What I want to do now is to start applying the creative ecologies model to health and PE in particular. So I'm going to start with a focus on policies. I know I've mentioned it briefly already, I guess, in terms of how I viewed the new VCHPE and how it fitted in my creative ecology. But I'm going to start with a brief look at the Victorian Curriculum and the VCHPE. We'll shimmy over to practices, and then I've got a few more activities for you to participate in. But for now, I want to ask you just one more question, and that is, in what ways does the Victorian Curriculum and or the VCHPE support or limit your creativity as a teacher? So I'd like you to just take a minute to think on your own. Then I'm going to pop you in breakout rooms for you to chat with a colleague. And then I'd like, in your pairs or small groups, to share one factor or process or resource that supports and one that limits your creativity in relation to the curriculum. Okay, so again, please reply via the Google Doc. And if you've got any questions, please shout. I'll give you a minute, and then I'm going to pop you into breakout rooms. So I asked you, in what ways does the Victorian Curriculum and or the VCHPE support or limit your creativity? So in terms of, we'll take a strengths-based approach. It's open-ended. There's opportunity and prompts for student agency and choice. If we look at, for example, the 5 propositions, critical inquiry and health literacy, all examples of student-centered pedagogies, opportunities for interdisciplinary learning, and it's not prescriptive in terms of the content and context. So that's probably a double-edged sword for some. You know, some like the prescriptive nature of some curricula, and sometimes this flexibility can be a bit scary, but it does open up these opportunities and these spaces for creativity. In terms of limiting, school structures, so I guess not technically an element of the curriculum, but if our schools don't allow for flexibility around timetabling or room distribution, then it's going to be a challenge to utilise this flexibility of the curriculum in our school context. Other limits, as you can see.
Laura, to jump in. Oh, you'll need to reshare your screen again now that we've come back from the breakout rooms. We can't see your slides. Sorry.
No worries. I'm just chewing ears off. All good. There you go.
There we go. Perfect. Thank you.
All right. So thank you very much for sharing there. What I would like to do now is we're going to shimmy on. There we go. So I'm going to start with a broad focus on the Victorian curriculum before zoning into the VCHPE in particular. I'm not going to spend too much time on this. I'm kind of just flagging it, and then Rosie's going to pick up on a few of these ideas later on. Again, apologies for telling you stuff you already know. I'm just setting the scene. That was my job. Okay, so we've got the critical and creative capability, cross-curricular. So as teachers, we're expected to provide the opportunities for students to do all these things, yeah, to be creative and innovative and enterprising and adaptable. Good luck with that one. Okay, so this is our task. Okay, and this links to what Anne said earlier about focusing on how we learn to learn. So this critical and creative thinking capability is all about giving students the opportunity to use critical and creative thinking purposefully. Yeah, and that can take different forms, and I'll provide some examples shortly. So in HP in particular, the curriculum writers put creativity, or at least this notion of creatively, front and centre in the rationale and aims. And throughout the document, we'll see creativity and thinking creatively more or less explicitly and implicitly at different stages. But in terms of the aim of the VCHPE, it's integral to HPE, the acquisition of movement skills, concepts and strategies to enable students to confidently, competently and creatively participate in a range of physical activities. So it's intended that we focus on these three things, and these three words crop up very frequently in the document: confidence, competent and creative. Now, whether we've been prepared in our teacher education to do this stuff is a conversation for another day, but this is what we are tasked with. Okay, so still focusing on the VCHPE as a policy within the creative ecology, there's 3 times where creativity is explicitly mentioned, and that's here. So across level 3, 4, 5, 6 and 9, 10, we can see creative thinking in solving movement challenges, creative thinking processes in order to generate and assess solutions to movement challenges, and planning and evaluating new and creative interventions that promote their own and others' connection to community and natural and built environments. Okay, so what, not how, that's referring to the fact, and it links to one of the comments that you raised in the Google Doc, that this, with the exception of the 5 propositions or the 5 key ideas, the curriculum asks or tells us what to teach, but not how to teach it. So that automatically is a space for us to rub up against each other, as Anne suggests, and start to think of new and creative ways to teach this stuff. Okay. Moving on to the practices element. There's actually not a lot of research on creativity in HPE, which was part of the motivation for Anne, Rosie and myself getting stuck into this. What does exist, and there's not much more than what's on this slide, so when I say there's not much, I mean there's not much. But the research suggests that HPE and PE in particular, I say that because that's where most of the research emerges from, and there's an endless range of movement possibilities, and that creativity can be a key feature of teaching and learning in related to gymnastics or dance, creative physical education or other models. Jackie and John will explore that later. Outdoor and adventurous activities, and then more recently, Shane, Pill and Brendan Susie's work on creativity in the game game sense, TGFU, tactical and strategic development space. But as ever, the research only tells part of the story. Okay, so with that in mind and with this presentation a focus, I thought it would be best to get some teacher voice in here. So I asked Christina Politeco, who is a teacher I met virtually a few years ago, and we've maintained contact since then. And she's one of many amazing and creative teachers in Victoria who are always trying to find new and more creative ways to teach HPE. So I asked her a few questions, and I'm going to share about 3.5 minutes of this video with a half-time break. And when you watch it, I'd just like you to think about that question on the screen there. So what key factors does Christina identify as important when thinking about creative practices in HPE? So if you can multitask, I'd like you to watch the video, think about how you might respond to that question, but also think about how what she's saying links to your own experiences and context in creative ecologies.
Hi everyone, my name is Christina Politeco from Diamond Valley College. I'm the AFL Academy coach here and also Year 7 to 9 health and PE educator. I've been educating for the last 11 years, mostly in primary schools, and this year during a world pandemic I decided to jump ships to high school, from primary school to high school, and it's been a fantastic challenge, which I loved it, and I've really embraced that whole challenges and being able to transition from the primary to secondary. But today I'm here to talk about creativity and how I use that within my programs. And I think for me, how do I define creativity is about you develop something pretty special, you develop something new that you may have used or seen before, and you adapt your own imagination, like I said, to create something pretty special. Creativity for me is really important because it keeps my job, my program, my intentions, my outcomes more interesting, more exciting. I need to make sure my students will enjoy the lesson or the program, and this is about the students, not about me. It's not about what's best for me. At the end of the day, I'm a facilitator that's guiding my students, and I want to make sure that they are excited to be there, and creativity fits into that program. And at the end of the day, if I think it's a bit boring what I'm trying to do, and the students won't think it's exciting as well. So showing your creativity with your students, peers and teachers and school shows that you're passionate, shows that you care about what you are doing, not only in schools but in life in general as well. What does creativity in health and PE look like? Well, for me, it's about trying new ideas and what's going to work for particular groups, and some of these ideas that you've come up with won't work for every single class or session, because everyone's different. So you've really got to think, okay, it's going to work for these guys, but that's not going to work for that. So I need to adapt it and be creative and change it up for this type of group of students. So creativity is also about setting the scene and storytelling through physical literacy. So getting them to be hooked on to what the ending will be within our storytelling. Set the scene with your learning intentions, purposes, outcomes. Tell the story through activities. Get the students to tell the story as well through their trial and error.
So hopefully from that you identified a few factors that Christina shared in relation to how she understands creativity, what it can and can't look like. And thanks to those who have shared, we came up with some similar ideas around being adaptable, keeping it interesting, us as a facilitator of creativity, having student engagement and a focus on student interests and learning really at the fore. So thank you so much for sharing there. Chris is about to hit play on another short segment, about 90 seconds. And here Christina's talking about what she feels supports her. Okay, so what we're going to about to flow into a conversation on what supports our creativity across our creative ecologies, and this is just some of her thoughts.
I guess what supports me being a creative health and PE teacher, it's about networking. And I see so many creative educators, not only in the health PE section, but in all sections of education. It's fantastic. This is why I believe education is such a rewarding career, job, hobby, because you just get fascinating people out there that think, when I see someone do something, it's like, oh God, how did you think of that? So yeah, it's all brilliant stuff. And I guess it's not about using the fancy equipment or the technology all the time. And trust me, I'm a big technology fan. But I've learnt really quickly when I've adapted to high school and to this school in particular, there hasn't been that technology. So I have to sort of think on my feet really quickly and be creative and use my imagination without the fancy tech stuff and the bells and the whistles. So I really had made connections with the real world, trial and error, getting the students' voice on what they think will be creative in this section of our learning. How can we adapt it? How can we make it a bit more interesting? Again, it's not about me, it's about getting them involved with the program. So, and that's really thing. And don't ever think that when something's been used before, you can't do it again.
Okay, thank you everybody. So thanks for sharing on that activity. There's a few things I really liked about that last section, where she was talking about the shift from primary to secondary, and how at the primary level she had the luxury of access to technology and reliable Wi-Fi and all these people she could partner with and collaborate with, and then moving to secondary she faced a whole other range of challenges where technology was essentially taken out of the mix. What I'm really careful of doing here is conflating technology with creativity. I'm not doing that, but I really like how she's kind of taken a step back to the nuts and bolts of creative teaching, being in front of the students, being adaptable and vulnerable and okay to make mistakes. So thank you to Christina for sharing her eyes and ears there. I'll go back to sharing my screen. All good? Yeah, fab.
Great, thanks, Laura.
No worries. Okay, what I would like to do now is, I guess I've taken out the policies element of the creative ecology and I've taken out the practices, but I want to now move towards viewing them all as messy, just like they are in reality. Okay, and so to do that, I've just got one more video for you to watch. We're going to watch the whole thing. It's about 3 minutes. And when you watch it, I've got some questions for you. There's no easy ride here. Okay, so again, I want you to respond via the Google Doc. I'll highlight where we're up to in a sec. But these are your 4 questions. Why did the teacher see a need to be creative? What did they decide to do, or why did they decide to do that? What did they decide to do that was creative? Yes. What impact did their creativity have on the students? And finally, and this is the main one really, in what ways could you see the different elements of creative ecologies playing out in practice or supporting creativity? So just before I hit play, essentially this is a video diary of some work that myself and Justin O'Connor have been doing with Elizabeth Murdoch College over the past 3 years. They came to us saying, we're going to put the curriculum in the bin and we want to start fresh. So it's an absolute dream. Never thought this would happen in a million years. But we worked through, I guess, all those things that Christina's just talked about. You know, we made mistakes and we were okay with failure. And we just kept going until it worked and it served the students and the school. The teachers actually referred to a pit of despair, which is not ideal, but they did come out the other end with a HPE curriculum that was creative and educative and aligned to the curriculum and inclusive and all that jazz. So I'm going to stop talking, I'm going to play the video, and then you can answer those questions.
For the past 18 months, we've been working with Monash. They've been helping us revamp our health and PE curriculum. We recognised that our previous program wasn't meeting our vision, so we wanted to change things up so that all of our students could improve, all of our students could show growth and increase their physical activity. We started to think about what we wanted our students to be able to do, what we wanted them to know, and the kind of people that we wanted them to be when they left our health and PE program. So whilst we still held a value to the fundamental motor skills and the tactics that can be transferred across different sports, we also wanted to draw upon the personal and social capability as well. So the students can choose between 4 different assessments based on what they want to learn. It might be that there's particular skills that they want to learn, or it could be that they want to work on their teamwork or their leadership, or they might want to learn some more about the tactics and the rules to the sport.
Everybody chooses their own individual rubric. I chose leadership, and I've learned how to work as a team.
There's like leadership and teamwork, and those are two that I've been working on. So learning how to be a leader when playing the sport, coaching other people, and then teamwork, so talking and being inclusive with everyone.
The students are working in small groups, so you might have 4 or 5 different activities happening. So within that smaller environment, it gives every student the opportunity to have a go and to practice, and therefore to get it right.
A little game for people, you get more like ball use and you practice easier.
Previously, they may have gone an entire lesson without having that opportunity to be caught doing it right, which obviously then had an impact on their assessment as well. Whereas now they have the opportunity to practice their skills and they can see how those tactics work on a smaller scale, which then allow them to apply to a bigger scale later on. Each student is on, I guess, their own little plan, their own little program, and they have their own individualised goals. And then we assess against those goals.
Being able to choose how to assess in HPE is good because you have your own option and you can practice it.
I think it's good that the students have voice in what they're doing. I think it gives them a choice in what they learn, so they're not being forced to do something that they don't want to do.
The school has offered us an incredible amount of support, and I really don't think that it could be done without the support from the leadership team and from our principal, giving us the time and giving us the funds to ensure that this program is long-lasting. It's been really great working with Monash. I don't think that this program would have worked without them. Monash were able to give us a lot of the ideas which got us started. And then have spent a lot of time in our school working with us, helping us, giving us feedback, helping things change.
They came to us asking if we could support them in a curriculum renewal, reimagine what health and physical education could look like. So measuring the impact of the changes in teaching approaches on student learning.
I can see a difference in the students in terms of their engagement and their participation. Now I have a lesson where all students are able to be active and want to be engaged in the lesson. It went from only 75% opting in to 100% participation rate in almost all classes. I'm really proud of how the teachers have taken this on board. It is a really different way of teaching. We're on all the time, we're trying new things, we're working really hard, we're making mistakes, and that's okay, it's how we're learning, but it's worth it because we can identify really specific areas where we're having an impact on our students.
Okay, folks, with time in mind, we'll chop it there. We did most of it. I'm just looking at the Google Doc, and there is some really cool responses in relation to the first few questions, and then that final table is blank, which is absolutely fine, but Chris is about to put you into some breakout rooms, slightly bigger, 3 or 4, and please don't put me in, Chris. And I'd like you to think about how those creative ecologies played out in that video. So I've pasted the diagram into the Google Doc so you can have a look and have a reference. I'm going to stop talking because I know we're running on a timeline. So Chris, if you can send us out, and just 2 to 3 minutes in the group. So quick game's a good game.
Sorry, Laura. I think the automatic assign might have put you in a room, but you can just close it.
Yeah, I've said no.
Perfect. Sorry.
Yeah, just put someone else in there. It's okay.
Yep.
I'm just going to stop the recording. I'll pause it.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. That was a big task that I set you with. So I have provided you with a cheat sheet, which is on the screen. In the spirit of keeping to time, I'm not going to go through it. but you will have access to the slides and you can ask any questions you would like via email, okay, or afterwards. But I will just quickly, this slide kind of brings together different resources that were really important in that creative approach to curriculum transformation, and they kind of transcend the different levels of the creative ecology. So I've underlined the partnerships with school leadership because if the principal hadn't funded and supported that whole endeavour, it wouldn't have happened. We've tried similar approaches to creativity in HPE over the past decade, and they've all fallen flat on their faces in one way or another. They might have been successful in the moment, but the sustainability was never possible because the school leadership wasn't on board. So because the school leadership was on board, that meant that they funded CRT, so the teachers had space to think, so that they had space to peer and team teach and also observe their colleagues. It meant that there was flexibility. So of course the principal said we had flexibility over the timetable to allow classes to occur concurrently or separately. There was just so much flexibility to allow this to happen. And I'm highlighting this because with all the goodwill in the world, if our ecology is not supporting and fostering creativity, then we're arguably not going to get very far. There are exceptions. So these are the key resources that I would suggest that you look for, hunt out, and navigate. Okay, opportunities to collaborate with colleagues, professional development that's embedded as opposed to kind of one-off, one-size-fits-all. Time, I'm talking years, not minutes. The funds, curriculum and policy that excites you and supports you. And as you said earlier, there's elements of the VC-HPE and the VC more broadly that supports your creativity. It's got its limitations, but we've got a relatively good starting point. A clear vision and motivation to achieve that vision, whatever that may be for your school and your students and your staff. And as I said, a school structure that supports our endeavours. So you've got Anne's checklist or inventory that she shared earlier, and then this is kind of my own little list that we found from our work with Elizabeth Murdoch College. So between what Anne provided and the video we shared and this kind of checklist of resources, hopefully you can use this as a bit of a resource to map against your own school context and ecology, and see what kind of score you'd give your school out of 8 or your community out of 8. And again, equally, it might help you identify some gaps where support could be present, but it's not as yet. So I'm about to wrap up, so we've got chance for questions, but just a few takeaway points before we do that. Hopefully these have kind of permeated throughout the session, but if they haven't, context is incredibly important. We are all creative. There's no one way to be creative. We have lots of opportunities to be creative in how we plan, teach and assess. Some of us do, some more than others. Oh, I've put there is no one way to be creative twice. That shows there's 2 ways to be creative. Our context and ecologies can support our creativity to varying degrees. And as Anne suggested, looking at the different policies, practices, products, partnerships, and the place, that can help us navigate and better understand and hunt out these opportunities for creativity. Particular resources can promote the likelihood of these possibilities becoming a reality. And there are exceptions. I love this picture on the left that says, being creative in times of stress is like running in hot, humid weather. It's possible, it just takes more effort. And that was just 2020, and that's my exception. We've all had to be creative this year, and we didn't have the time to do it. We didn't have the mental or physical space to do it, but we did it because we're awesome. So I'm going to stop there, and we'll have questions and any discussion. So thank you for your time.